Well, we've all been through some extraordinary times over the last 12 months. It's been very, very difficult for so many people. But for two people within this industry, those those feelings have been heightened to a large degree. Karl Standley, the head groundsman at Wembley, well, this time last year was preparing for the what would have been the biggest football event since football came home in 1996. Obviously, that was all cancelled. And Andy Gray, the head of grounds at St George's Park, well, this time last year, I think he was still at his previous job in Southampton. So he's had a new job to take on in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm delighted to have been joined by both Karl and Andy. And where to start? Well, I think maybe we will start with Karl. This time last year, what were your feelings when everything started to shut down and you knew at that stage or still thought you had a huge tournament to prepare for?
Yeah, hi Scott. I think it was all a surprise for everyone. Suddenly the scenario that we got put into, no one's ever run a scenario like that before, where suddenly everything is shut down and stopped and you're sort of told not to go to work now. Telling a football pitch, don't grow, I need you to stay where you are for the next couple of weeks, months, or whatever the future was to look like. I think for us, we put two scenarios in place. We knew that we were going to have the Euros coming up. So again, we prepared with the reconstruction through the winter to meet the business model. And then again, I think as soon as the pandemic hit and we heard those words, about a week before, we did put a plan in place to say what would happen if. And again, we just split our team into two. And I think the first thing, making sure the team are safe, making sure they're healthy, making sure that, again, any issues in their home life we are well aware of and there to support, but also then look out the pitch. Now, luckily, our roles are wide, so we are in fresh air and we can keep each other safe and just put sort of protocols in place for when we're in the building. So, yeah, it was a bit of a difficult situation to start to manage, but I think everyone bought into the mindset of, right, we need to keep each other safe, we need to have good communication, and then again, I think looking forward to what the next few months were to hold. No one knew if this would be a month or two or three, or what about when's football coming back was the question everyone was asking, but we just knew at the stadium, right, keep this pitch as healthy as possible, and get it ready for whenever football was to come back, and that was really our plan.
For work on the pitch, were there plans that had to be put on hold, or that work already been carried out and will it have to be repeated going forward into this year?
Yeah, luckily the reconstruction was through the winter. So the first game was the Carabao Cup final on the 1st of March 2020. And to think back then, full capacity and a good final that we had, and then that was it. The next two games were England internationals. So again, the main project for us was over the line, ready for Euros, as well as a few others around the stadium too. So by that point, I think we just put everything on hold. But again, we looked at the practices that we undertake. So things like regular raking, the regular verticutting. We're constantly on the pitch with rake, just trying to thin it out, keep it as healthy as possible, and also make the plant work. But we also sort of thought that, again, it's hard I'll probably say, for a lot of grounds teams to stop and to sit still. So again, once we got into a comfortable area, we then decided we'll run scenarios. So again, we were looking at, well, how quickly can we do 4 rakes off the playing surface, and then how quickly can we recover? So we ran a few scenarios during lockdown as well, so just to give us a bit more of an understanding about the data that we were getting back from the pitch and the cultural practices that we could undertake, ready for whenever football came back, and also for potentially for the Euros too.
It was interesting. I was speaking to Neil Stubley at Wimbledon not so very long ago and asking about the chances of Wimbledon this year. And he said, well, either it'd be no fans, all the fans, or some fans. But in all reality, none of these particularly affected him because his job was to maintain the courts just the same way. Now, I'd imagine that's a similar scenario for you.
Yeah, it was. Minimal people within the stadium. For my role, again, for 2 days of the week, I did work from home, but also then came in and swapped over with other team members to ensure we had minimal people on site and that we weren't all in the building at the same time. That was it. Football, sort of, the pitches did continue. Mother Nature doesn't have an out of office. So again, we always talk about sort of both myself and Andy from a football background, in the Premier League, you could have, from Championship and other leagues, you could have a Boxing Day game. So even on Christmas Day, it's still growing. And for us, it was really just carry on, but just put that sort of protective bubble around the team and carry on the good work.
Now, Andy, this time last year, your situation was completely different. You were a different employer, a different part of the country. How did you look forward to the next few months going forward? Were you obviously putting preparations or thoughts in place for Southampton, and then midway through a complete change for you?
Indeed, yeah. So much like obviously when it all stopped, nobody had a clue what was going on. I remember at that time, the Premier League all football was being suspended for 2 weeks, and the next fixture was due for like April the 4th or something like that. Obviously, that then got called off, and it went to later in April, and then it went further on, and eventually got going again mid to late June, I think it was. So it was quite tricky at that time to know what we could and should do in terms of the pitches, both at the stadium and at the training ground, because if we'd have known on March 23rd that we had until essentially June the 23rd, we would have ripped them all up and renovated there and then. But we did it on March 23rd. We had 2 weeks. So, okay, we just maintain until they come back. 2 weeks became sort of 4 weeks and 6 weeks and so on. So I remember there was a lot of chat amongst the ground staff around the country as to what to do with renovation wise, because if it does get going again in June, is there time to then renovate before next season? Because even at that time, we did the 1920 season, and we go straight to 2021 season. So most of us, including us, renovated our stadium pitches middle to end of April. And once it got going in June, the teams wanted like a pre-season game, training sessions, etc. So we renovated end of April. We see 1st of May, and we're playing on the 5th of June. So we've got a pitch back in 5 weeks, basically, which is not quite as short as what Karl's done most years, to be fair, but it's certainly the shortest I've ever done it in. But it was doable. And training ground wise, we didn't actually renovate a single training pitch fully because we just weren't able to. We just didn't have that window. Got done what I would term half, some a quarter, and some didn't at all. And speaking to the things at Southampton sort of throughout the season, all done. Those 2 pitches we didn't get renovated have struggled. If there's any experience that you have as positive out of sort of a bad experience, if you like, is that it proves why we do what we do in renovation times, because people often look at you like you're crazy, man. What are you ripping up that for? That's a perfectly good pitch. And the answer is, well, if you don't, it won't be like that this time next year. And so this season, last summer, this season has proved that it's the perfect opportunity to prove that that's why you do what you do.
I've heard that comment made through a number of different sports, golf one of them as well, that it has put much more of an emphasis on the conditions and the playing surfaces, which can only be good going forward, as you've said. So that is one of the few silver linings around a very dark cloud. Now, the FA came calling, and your new job started in the middle of the pandemic.
It did, yeah.
And presumably relocating as well. It must have been a tricky time for you, all in all.
I wouldn't say tricky, because the word I would describe as exciting. As I said in a few previous sort of interviews that I've done, it's the FA, it's England, it's basically it was just pure excitement of what I wanted to do. Location-wise, I haven't actually moved up lock, stock and barrel. I live in Southampton, that's where my family are, and I just commute up once a week. I rented accommodation in Burton, and then obviously go home for weekends still. So in terms of that, it was just simply a case of paying a monthly rent. I haven't moved furniture or my family or anything else like that. So that was actually quite seamless, to be honest. But yeah, in terms of actually starting mid-pandemic, I started on the 1st of September when arguably the pandemic was at its least severe, shall we say. And then once November hit, lockdown 2, the tier system through December, and then obviously lockdown 3 in January. Since November the 1st, it's been quite tough, I have to say, but you just get on with it. And as I've said all along, there's plenty of people working what I'm lucky that I've got what I've got and do.
Now, starting when you did, you've given you what, 9 months until it ramps up for the Euros, and St George's Park will be the hub, of the whole England's campaign to win the Euros. That's a good amount of time for you to get your feet under the table, but by the same token, you're having to learn where the toilets are, where you go to book your holidays, where all these sorts of procedures that are in place for normal working, you've got to get that on, as well as look at all these lovely pitches that you've got at St George's Park and make sure they're tip top.
No, you're dead right. It has been a learning curve all round. I was at my previous employer for 22 years. So essentially, I think out of roughly 350 employees, I was the third longest serving. So I've gone from everybody coming into employment knowing that I was there to being the new person coming into everybody else. I've never experienced that before, so that in itself was a new experience. But in terms of obviously the pandemic with nobody being around, that has allowed me to get to know the site, where things are, how things work. It's just I just haven't met people in the flesh, unfortunately, which most of these people I would have met within the first sort of 2-3 weeks. I just met a couple of the England backroom staff last week for the first time, and again I met them 6 months ago. So you see them on video calls, etc., but it isn't the same. But yeah, in terms of the pitch, I started in September. Very first day was the September international camp. With October, November, through the winter, last week's camp. So I've had a good amount of time to get used to the pitches and know what we're going to do ready for June, when, like you say, we host base camp for the Euros, which is really exciting.
Now, do you go in to sort of pick up the reins from the previous incumbent, or do you go in there with a fresh sheet of paper and with your own views on how you're going to do things? Is it more prescriptive, or have you got a free hand to enforce what you want to do?
On the whole, it's free hand to do what I want to do. It's a strange situation because there was 9 months in between Scott, my predecessor, leaving and me starting, and in that interim, it was being looked after by essentially what was now my teams. So there was no handover, obviously, at all. And in the middle of that was obviously the pandemic as well. So it wasn't a normal handover, but I like to think that I obviously got the job on the back of what I'd achieved at Southampton, both pitch-wise, but staff-wise, business-wise. You want to look at any angle that you come at of the job these days. So that's what I've looked to impose since I've come to the FA at St George's Park, to essentially continue carrying what I was doing at Southampton, but up here instead.
Now, Karl, Wembley is the most famous football pitch in the world. A lot of people, it's like the old course for St Andrews for golf. It's where everybody wants to get the opportunity to play, and a lot of people have had those chances taken away from them last year, perhaps postponed until this year. So there'll be an awful lot of pressure on Wembley, I would imagine, over the next few months. How many matches do you reckon you'll have between now and the start of the Euros? When is it 6 or 7 matches you have in the Euros, 2 semi-finals and a final, and some others?
Yeah, for Euros we've got 7 games, 5 training sessions, and probably around about between 7 and 8 closing ceremony rehearsals. So again, with the final being held at Wembley, there will be a big closing ceremony for that. So yeah, a very busy month, but also, yeah, going back, I mean, there was a backlog. Football did stop, which means that was predominantly for our month of April and May. So everything from the FA Cup semi-finals to the final itself, and then going into the Vase, the trophy, and all the other events that we host, and the playoffs. So at some point they needed to drop. When football did come back last year through July and August, we did have the playoffs to prepare, obviously, to know who was going to go where in what league. But we have back 2 weeks ago, we just had the Papa John's Trophy, Portsmouth versus Salford, and that was from 2020. So there still is a bit of a backlog going into May. Also this year, we've got the FA Vars, FA Trophy, double header in one day, which again was from last year as well. So and they are starting to sort of filter through into the usual calendar, which we usually have for April. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not what you can't do, it's what you can do. So for us, make pitches ready and prepared, whatever we need to get done. Like Andy said, we're lucky to be in our role to be healthy. I think that's number one. So for us and the grounds team itself, whatever events come in, whenever they come in, we'll be prepared and ready. But for Euros, it's a busy schedule. In some with a lot of events back and forth beforehand, so that'll be a good month.
Do you prepare the pitch to the same level, whether it's a non-league match finals or the Euro final itself? Is it all done to the same standard, or is there different degrees of preparation go in place?
No, it's all done the same. Again, where we're sort of classed as a neutral venue, for us, it's how does that pitch play best? When you've got, whether it's the FA Cup semi-finals, the final itself, or you've got any events going around, it's a neutral. We just ensure that we make sure the pitch is the best to play. For me, it's always going to be a quick game of football, and that's what we like to see. That's what brings the entertainment. That's what the players are now using at their training centres to practice on and then play in their own venues. So for us, for whether it's FA Vars, FA Trophy, Emirates FA Cup final, it's always the same. And I think we've been behind closed doors. It's been missed. There's no sort of better feeling that you prepared the pitch in the morning and the team look at each other and they go, right. And we always are one step ahead. We always plan for pre-game, whether it's a verti cut or a rake or whatever you want to do to the playing surface. But there's that sort of 20 minutes that I always think when doors open, and in the stadium you get an announcement and it says doors are now opening, and the fans come in, and there's children, there's people who've been to Wembley for the first time ever, and I think it's remembering. Then they walk in, they go, wow, the size of it, the green pitch with the backdrop of the red seats with the arch and the sort of team that is around you, and the faces that. Again, just wow, I'm at Wembley. But you get that from the teams as well. So no matter what league, they walk out onto that pitch and this is their day at Wembley. And that's the reason why we should are playing. That is the exact same for Cup final than it would be for any other event that we host, because that is their day at Wembley.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do know you hear about this at World Players of the Year. And they still get excited if they get the opportunity to play at Wembley. They know how many times they've played there. It's wonderful. Now, this is just maybe a bit of selfish, but I'm just wondering, how do you make sure that the pitch is absolutely billiard table smooth, so that when there's no bad bounce going to defeat David Marshall there when Scotland get to the final of the Euros?
I like positive thinking there. We use many a way. Experience is one. Wembley, I mean, what you do on one pitch sometimes might match for another playing surface. So again, I think I've been here for 15 years. David Mole's in my team, 15. Brendan Abbott coming up to 14. And Harry Volland, Butler and Ant Sunny have been with us respectively for coming up to 4 months now for Harry, and then Ant's been with us for 2.5. We all have experience of what this playing surface is like. And again, we always know that, again, we're looking at the cultural methods, again, with the planning we did last year as well, verti-cutting, raking, and it is just really the cultural methods. On the back of a game, we'll normally tear the pitch to pieces and just go, right, let's get this grass plant working, keep it as healthy as possible. And really, if we can be cultural over chemical, that's our philosophy. But also away from the machinery and also the team doing their work, it's about data. So again, picking up all the data that we read, ensuring that the rotational resistance is there, ensuring something we picked up recently with the winter growing is textile strength. But that data is key to me to know, right, when sunlight is starting to enter our building in middle of March and the first blade of grass gets the first touch of light, we know that we're then sort of charging that pitch up and that textile strength will come in. Without that, it's a guessing game and everyone can have an opinion. But without that data, there's key areas that I'll always look at on the data to make sure that we are ready. So that's the key thing. And I think over time we have that experience within the team of what does it look like. And also again, I'm the team's grounds manager, but also having the team's opinions and their thoughts as well. Sharing that data throughout the team, listening to what the team think of, do you think we could do this, or should we look at this, and actually having that key word, which is communication, throughout the whole team. And then we use that, we implement it, and then we deliver our playing surface.
Now, Andy, St George's Park will be the where the Brains, mentioned it earlier, the Brains Centre for the England campaign for the Euros. Will you be having discussions with Gareth Southgate or one of his team about what his requirements are of you in the lead up to the championships?
Yes, of course. Yeah, where St George's Park is a football training facility, but it obviously isn't like a club training ground. Just for the fact that the teams you're looking after are only here for a week at a time, and there's so many different ones at that. So for base camp for June, we are simply treating it as a club training ground for hopefully 5-6 weeks. And within that, yeah, of course, a daily dialogue with either Gareth or Steve Holland, his assistant. The medical team also play a huge part as well. So just with a couple of the medical department last week, not only that, but we'll be speaking to Karl as well, because essentially we want to produce the same pitch that they're going to train on, that they're going to play on. So in terms of sort of mostly pitch firmness, we did that last week. So we're trying to prepare the training pitch last week, similar to what Wembley would have been for last Thursday night and tomorrow night. But yeah, as it ramps up, getting closer and closer, we will be speaking to coaching staff, medical staff to get their requirements, their needs. But a general rule, and that's anything at the top level, is short and wet. That's what they want it as, and obviously, so quite basic parameters, but more than achievable.
You must get quite a buzz about being almost a part of the team, part of England's Euro campaign.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you know, I'd say I started in September, and we had the first autumn international base camp training camps, and because they just sort of flew by. But weirdly, this past week, when not just the senior team, but with the under-21s being on TV as well, watching it felt like I was part of it. And you could see not players, but the people sat on the bench, the coaching staff, the backroom staff. You can say, I saw him at St George's Park last week, etc., etc. So it does make you feel part of it 100%. And again, it makes you feel like the club team. And you know, with Southampton, I knew all the coaching staff, all the backroom staff, etc. So they're friends, colleagues, etc. They're not just names on a team sheet, etc. So absolutely it is. And I'm like with any person that follows football as a kid, Italian 90, Euro 90, growing up in France 98, it was, remember the buzz around it, and that's what one of the big things obviously attracted me to the role in the first place. So to just stand there watching them train last week for 20 minutes on Wednesday was a proper privileged position to be in, definitely.
Now, you touched on it there, but how closely do the two of you work at the moment? You mentioned making sure that conditions are as close to identical at St George's Park and the training pitches as they are on the main pitch at Wembley. But how do you go about that? Is it Zoom calls? Have you had a chance to get together at all over the last few weeks and months?
It's mostly we've met each other once in person. That was at the start of December. I went down to Wembley just to catch up with Karl for the day. Other than that, it's Teams calls, WhatsApp, etc., etc. But we would talk weekly without question. That would be about others are about vintage football shirts, Panini sticker albums, children. So I know I'm sure you're aware, I'll go back to 2003-ish. So we've known each other a long time. We've shared trips abroad together. We went to each other's weddings, etc. So there's more to it than just work with us two, definitely. Yeah.
Now, Karl, when it comes to the synergy we talked about, who decides the length of the pitch, or is it the height of cut? Is it you, or is it Andy? Who's the boss? In other words, who makes the final decision?
We both got our. I'll be honest with you, Andy's mentioned back from Go and the foundation that we both Southampton. And I personally feel that, I mean, the team going back in 2004, 2005, Andy, I think it was, that for our grounds team, that was a good grounds team. And I think that's where we built our foundation from, as what do good teams look like. And I sort of would always benchmark my Wembley team against that team, because that team had everything. It had professionalism. It had, I mean, you look at the names in the team. There myself, and there was Andy, Dave Roberts, who's now grounds manager at Liverpool, Graham Mills at Southampton, and we had Ricky Rawlins and Dan Osborne, who's under Steve Braddock at Arsenal. And again, it's really good, a very small team, but a really good team. And I think that's where we probably found like our foundation from, if I'm really honest with you. And like Andy said, we'll pick up a call once a week, whether it is on the way home and a quick call to have a quick chat, or whether it is how you're doing, or really anything that comes across our minds, including vintage football shirts and Panini stickers, which was a conversation we had last night. So, like Andy said, it's that whole thing going back to like Euro 96, and like I used to collect football stickers, so did Andy, and now at 36 years old and however old Andy, we're still doing it. So it's just, yeah, we both just have a conversation. And also, if I ever had something at Wembley I wasn't too sure on, I would use Andy to say, Andy, quick question. This is my thought process. What do you think? And almost share it out, because my line manager will be very honest with you, Liam. And so I talk to him sometimes and he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. You're there to deliver these playing surfaces. And it is quite a niche thing that we do. And again, we've talking to Andy, a quick conversation is, Andy, I've got this thing in my brain. I'm going to quickly let you know. And we have a conversation about it. What do you think? And have you ever had this before, that scenario? What do you think about this? And we just literally bat off each other with that sort of ideas. Regarding the height of cut of grass at Wembley, Andy's right. It's short and it's wet, and that's what any team would want. As long as that ball is moving quickly, as long as they've got stability, that's all a player will ever need. And really, I think we both set our pitches out already how they potentially should be.
Now, can I ask, was it something Andy said that made you leave Southampton?
I think it was the first day I worked at Southampton. I got put with Andy. That was where I learned, my first day. So both from Sparshot College. My first day, I used to be a season ticket holder at the Dell and St Mary's. And it's something that I just got into as a youngster. My first day, I cycled to the training ground. I used to cycle 15 miles to the training ground, then get half an hour train, and then on the way back was the exact same. So 30 miles a day, working with the grounds team at Southampton. I fell in love with it. My first day, though, was with Andy in a really rusty red Hydromain with a little cedar on the back. And Andy's job for the day, if I'm right, Andy, was to like seed the pitches. And I mean, this is like
renovation, wasn't it?
It's renovation. Was it 4 pitches in a goalkeeper's area or 3 in a goalkeeper's area? This Hydromain didn't have any like air conditioning on it, anything like that. So Dave Roberts and Graham were like, go and sit with Andy and stadium, and you can sort of to him. He got on this Hydromain. Andy was like, I got in it. This story has come out a couple of weeks ago, and I looked at Andy. I was like, oh, hi, I'm Karl. Nice to meet you. And Andy just turns at me and he goes, nice to meet you. Sit down. And I'm like, like, what have I done? Sat down and that was it. The machine started. I have never sat in anything as loud as that in my life. So literally, if we wanted a conversation, we couldn't. And I remember my first day, I was really nervous, and I sat in this machine. I've got the guy from like St Mary's next door to me, and Andy said, "Go on, you have a go." So okay, no problem. Sat in the machine, drove. I'm going down these pitches, over the first pitch, over the second pitch, over the goalkeeper's area. Got to the 4th pitch, turned around, realised the cedar just died. I'm thinking, what have I done? And very coolly, Andy just said, just turn around and do it again. So we did, and that was it. And then sort of our friendship sort of blossomed from then onwards. I mean, leaving Southampton was hard. It's the team that I grew up at, the Dell, watching Matt Letizia score that last-minute goal against Arsenal. The last goal at the Dell, that place just rocked. To go into this new stadium for the first 6-7 games, lost. And again, sort of seeing everything around me and then working for your boyhood club, who supported so much. And again, seeing behind the scenes, I mean, the seasons that I was there, I mean, at one point, Clive Woodward was our manager. Harry Redknapp came in. I think we had like 6 managers in one season after George Burley. I mean, it was up and down at times. But you still love this brilliant little Marchwood on the edge of the New Forest training ground. And on match days, I'd go over into the stadium and help out. But the day that I remember I sort of packed my car up and go into that there London, it was hard, and it was really hard to sort of leave. My family is still down in Southampton, and like I said, I'll go down for a break with my wife and my little daughter. And 9 times out of 10, I'll go and see the man on this call as well and go and say hello. And like I said, our wives know each other. We both got daughters. So no, just gonna have a catch up. But no, Andy wasn't the reason I left Southampton. He was probably one of the hardest things to probably leave with that team of great grounds people, I must admit.
It's remarkable that the 2 guys sitting in that noisy machine, how many years ago was that? In the early 2000s?
About 18, yeah.
Yeah, I've now moved on to have 2 of the biggest jobs in the industry. I mean, if you put money in that, you'd have both not needed to work. You could have retired in the back of it. Is there? I mean, Southampton is not the biggest club in England, but they must have something down there. Is it the climate? Is it what is it that has nurtured you, Per, and Dave Roberts and others?
I can't speak for Dave to where he came from. I know where he came from, literally, but but I personally know Karl does as well. My first 9 years of my career was under Dave, and I said it before, and I'll say it forever. I couldn't have asked for a better mentor, tutor, teacher for the first 9 years of my career than Dave Roberts, basically. So I know for a fact that that's where my footing came from. And as I say, Karl wasn't quite there for as long as I was, but Dave is the same thing. So, and again, I've said it before that, Southampton isn't just a great academy of football players, it's an academy of ground staff as well. And that is, I tell you, so and again, I've said it previously, but there's a fair few good guys that have come out of Arsenal as well to go on to great and good things around Europe. But yeah, indeed, in terms of us, it might be the climate. It might make us look better than we are. I don't know.
I agree with Andy on that one. I think Dave was the first day I remember going to St Mary's the last game. I can't remember. I think it's Newcastle Saints were playing about to start my sort of 10-week placement at Southampton, and it's a 10 weeks turned into 18 weeks, and then I didn't want to go back to college after that because I loved it. I think the way that Dave made it, so everyone was allowed an idea, and everyone was allowed a process, and everyone was allowed a thought. And I remember one day I was at training grounds, and I've been there for probably 3 years, and I've been helping over at St Mary's. Andy was as well at the time. I think I remember saying, like, if Andy's never at Bournemouth and you need someone to cut Dean Court, then I'll be really available. I think Dave was really open to a youngster coming in and going, well, this is what I would like to do. Well, how do you envisage getting there then? And I remember me finishing the Spa show and the sort of original head groundsman, Tom Jewett, Graham Mills and Dave Roberts having a conversation about me being at college. And they said, you need to go back to college. You need to get your education. You can't just come to Southampton. You need to go and do that. But they were open to that. I think that's my biggest learning. My biggest learning is from those guys and listening to Dave. And I wanted to go to the stadium, and he said it might be a little bit sort of tricky. We've got Ricky at the stadium, Andy at the stadium. I said, well, I just love to work in a football stadium that the microclimate is very different. You're in a building. And Dave was really open to that. And again, it was like, well, would you like to come and do youth games? Would you like to do Premier League games? Would you like to come and assist Andy? I mean, and he was always open. And I think that's one thing that I've probably taken into my grounds team at the stadium now, Wembley, is that mindset of, because it was my first ever real manager, you listen and you just literally soak it all in. And Dave does have that sort of behaviour in him. And I think that's sort of shown throughout the team, quite calm, cool-headed, and sort of believes in myself and Andy. And he was open to us about when he went for the Wembley job, the process in 2004. So, or 2005, sorry. So, yeah, I think he's one of the real big linchpins that we all sort of listened to and learnt from.
Now, just before we go, what's the vintage of the Southampton shirt behind you? Because people might be interested if you see half the shirt in the picture.
That is my leaving shirt from Saints. So it's Wembley '06. It's signed by all the players, all the team, as well as Mr. Andy Gray and Mr. Dave Roberts and Graham Mills and everyone else, and Dan Osborne at the stadium. So when I left Southampton, I got a shirt with Wembley '06. My starting 1st of March 2006. I started here, and I got a signed shirt. So that's in the office. And if I'm right in saying, Andy, behind your desk.
Yeah, I'm not in it at the moment, but yes, you're right, there is. I've got my 20-year shirt, up in my office at St George's Park, Wonderful. Unfortunately, I'm sat in the meeting room in St George's now, so I haven't got it behind me. I've got Ray Wilkins behind me instead.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time this afternoon. It's been fascinating. It's delighted to get a chance to meet you virtually, if not in real life. And I know we'll all sit back and enjoy the Euros. I'll be looking forward to Andy Robertson picking up the trophy at the end of the tournament. You guys might be different. It might be Harry Kane for you guys, but we'll all keep our fingers crossed, and we hope it all goes well. And again, thank you very much for your time, both. Thank you.